My father left me out of his celebration because I bring back memories of his former wife. When I found out, I went to him, said I was finished, and walked away, letting him face his own sorrow alone. His cousin's Instagram story accidentally showed the invitation sitting on her kitchen counter. Time and place for David's 50th birthday gathering with the whole family. My brother Michael claimed he stopped by Dad's that evening. We talked for about 15 minutes before he casually mentioned his plans for Friday, asking, "What thing?" "Just a small dinner," he said. He knew everything. He knew and still hid it from me. "Is this Dad's birthday event?" "Nothing." "Then how did you know?" "So it's real." He asked everyone except me. "Perhaps he simply hadn't sent yours yet." "It's 3 days away, Michael. Look, I don't want to be caught in the middle. You're already caught." "You're attending a celebration I wasn't asked to." He let out a heavy breath. "What do you expect me to do?" "Stay home. I want you to ask him why his own daughter wasn't included." "You know the reason." Everyone knew the reason. I looked like Mom. Same dark hair, same green eyes, same small nose. Every morning the mirror showed her face staring back. The face that tore our family apart. I drove to Dad's house that Thursday. He was tinkering with something unnecessary in the garage. He always found ways to escape. "Hey, Dad." The moment he saw me, his expression hardened, as if paying attention to me cost him something. "What are you doing here?" "Can't I see my own father? I'm in the middle of something." He turned back to his workbench. "Are you throwing a party Friday night?" His back went rigid. "Who told you? Does it matter? Why didn't I get an invitation?" He finally faced me, eyes icy. "You already know the answer. Every single time I see you, I see her. Same eyes, same nose, same dishonest face. Mom walked out on him 10 years ago. I was 10. Michael was 12. She moved to Arizona with another man and started a new family. We never heard from her again. I am not her. I told him, I'm your daughter. I stayed. I chose you. Doesn't change anything. You look exactly like her, talk like her, even move like her. That's not something I chose. I don't care who chose it. I can't have you there. Not on my birthday. Not with relatives watching and remembering what she did. But Michael looks like her too. We're siblings. We share the same mother. Michael takes after me. He behaves like me. You're all her, every mannerism. Every smile, everything. He went back to his tools. Please go. Dad, I came to every Father's Day, every Christmas. Even when you barely noticed I was there, I said go. I sat in my car for an hour before driving home, thinking how he looked straight through me. Every school ceremony where he cheered loudly for Michael but barely clapped for me. Dad taught Michael how to drive but told me to figure it out myself. Pizza, television, and pretending I didn't exist, that was my Friday night. Michael sent photos from the party. Everyone was there, people I hadn't seen in years. Granny, who almost never flies, had come up from Florida. Every picture made me ache. Michael, Granny, cousins laughing together. My face was the wrong one, so I stayed home by myself. Michael rang Sunday morning. It felt strange without you, did it? Yet you still went. You still picked his side. There are no sides. He's our dad. He's your dad. Apparently I'm only a walking reminder of his ex-wife. That's not right. Right. He left me out of a family gathering because of how I look. Tell me what part of that is right. Silence. He's in pain. Michael finally admitted Dad had carried that hurt for 10 years, so have I. The difference is I didn't punish my child for it. I went back to his house on Monday. This time I didn't knock. I still had the spare key. He was sorting birthday cards at the kitchen table. Probably never bothered sending thank yous. "Get out," he muttered without raising his eyes. No, I sat down opposite him. "You have to listen. She hurt all of us. I lost my father the day she left, and Michael lost his mother. Even though you were still breathing, you disappeared when I was 10. The worst thing, I kept coming back, hoping one day you'd see me, not her. I'm finished trying to earn something that should have been given freely. Michael can have you all to himself." "Where are you going?" My vision blurred as I stood smiling. He rushed toward me, panic on his face, then everything went black. I woke up on the kitchen floor with David's trembling hands on my shoulders and his terrified face above me. Sirens grew louder outside. He had dialed 999 while I was unconscious. Paramedics burst through the front door moments later. A short blonde woman and a bearded man carrying heavy bags. David stepped back to give them space, his face pale as paper. The woman knelt, pressed 2 fingers to my wrist, and asked my name and where I was. My voice came out thin and hoarse when I answered. She shone a light in my eyes, asked me to track her finger, then wrapped a cuff around my arm. David stood against the counter, twisting his hands, and told them I collapsed after an argument while the man brought in more gear. The woman asked David about medications, allergies, past illnesses. He stumbled over every answer, admitting he didn't know most of it. She glanced between us, sensing the tension. She frowned at my blood pressure reading and told her partner to get me on the stretcher with straps across chest and legs. The man paused, then nodded. They asked David if he wanted to ride along. They loaded me in. The woman climbed in with me while David took the bench opposite. She placed an oxygen mask over my face, hooked me to monitors that started beeping, and asked about chest pain or shortness of breath. I said only dizziness before I blacked out, no chest pain, just extreme tiredness. David sat hunched, shivering despite the warmth, hands clamped on his knees. He reached toward my hand halfway through the ride, fingers stretching, then pulled back and gripped his thighs again. We stayed silent while the ambulance swayed and the siren cut through streets. I was wheeled through automatic doors into a bright hallway that smelled of antiseptic and floor wax. A nurse transferred me to a bay bed behind curtains. David trailed behind, looking lost at the doorway. Dr. Harrison, a tall man with glasses and silver hair, arrived soon after. He checked my pulse, shone lights in my eyes, listened to my heart and lungs after reading the paramedics' report. He asked about the fall, what I'd eaten, how much water I'd had, and recent stress. He kept looking between David and me, clearly expecting trouble. David stood in the corner staring at his shoes as if they belonged to a stranger. Dr. Harrison said it was a severe stress-related episode combined with dehydration and low blood sugar. My body had simply shut down from the perfect storm. He ordered tests and observation. A nurse cleaned my arm and slid in an IV with practiced ease. She taped it down, hung the bag, and started the drip. I was drained and closed my eyes until footsteps returned. She said I needed to stay at least 3 hours for monitoring and fluids. Michael burst in wearing the same shirt from the party, asking what happened. I opened my eyes to see him staring wide-eyed at David and me. David's voice was rough. She passed out at the house. Michael looked at our father, knowing there was far more to it. Michael pulled David into the corridor. I heard raised voices through the curtain. Michael demanded to know exactly what was said before I collapsed. I repeated David's words, making the accusation clear. Michael shouted that leaving me out of the party was cruel and wrong. Sophia arrived with my phone charger and an overnight bag just as their argument peaked. She glanced through the glass at the hallway drama, then came straight to my bed when Michael nodded. She asked softly what I needed and whether I wanted David gone. Her eyes were gentle but firm. My voice cracked when I said I couldn't handle him right now. Sophia went to the door and kindly but firmly told David to leave and let me rest. He started to protest. Michael said Dad had caused enough damage for one day. David's shoulders dropped. He shuffled down the corridor, looking suddenly ancient. Dr. Harrison returned with test results showing dangerously high blood pressure for my age and signs of prolonged poor nutrition. He asked directly if I felt safe at home, and whether the family conflict that landed me here was still active. It hurt to answer yes and explain about the birthday party and being punished for resembling my mother. His professional mask softened as he listened. He urged me to follow up with my GP and a counselor because stress was literally making me ill. He said my collapse was my body screaming that I couldn't keep going like this. Michael knelt beside the bed, took my hand, and looked ashamed. He admitted he should have stood up to Dad years earlier instead of taking the path of least resistance. Sophia rested a steady hand on my other shoulder. Corinne stormed in still wearing her party dress, face twisted with anger I'd never seen directed at her own son. She grabbed my free hand and held it tightly. She apologized for not speaking up sooner about David's treatment of me. Michael looked stunned by her fury. Corinne said she had watched the dysfunction for years and stayed quiet, making her complicit. She should have stepped in instead of hoping David would eventually heal on his own. Corinne squeezed my hand harder, jaw set. She told us she had confronted David at the party in front of everyone about why his daughter wasn't invited. David apparently tried to brush it off by saying I reminded him of my mother. Corinne called it the most disgusting excuse she'd ever heard. Tears ran down her face as she described how several aunts and cousins stopped eating to listen. David turned red and tried to walk away, but she followed him. After the scene, Isabella and others sent me worried texts when they realized I'd been left out. Corinne said many relatives looked ashamed, as if they knew it was wrong but went along anyway. She announced she was extending her hotel stay, whether David liked it or not, to deal with his behavior. Michael nodded, relieved someone had finally spoken plainly. Around 5:30 p.m., Dr. Harrison returned with discharge papers and a grave expression. He repeated rest, proper food and water, and a GP visit within 2 days. He handed me referral numbers and a stress leaflet that felt pointless the moment the nurse removed my IV. Sophia grabbed it before I could object and insisted I stay at Michael's instead of alone. She had already texted herself my apartment door code to pack a bag. Karen extended her hotel booking again, saying this matter wasn't finished. She would stay until David acknowledged his actions. I could walk, but hospital rules meant a wheelchair to the door. Michael's car waited at the pickup bay. The evening air felt sharp after a day inside. I was still wearing the same clothes from the collapse. Michael's small one-bedroom had a worn couch and a tiny kitchen. He fussed around me, asking what I wanted to eat, how I felt, what I needed. Sophia returned with a bag of my clothes, toiletries, charger, everything. She had managed it in 15 minutes. Michael ordered Thai food and insisted I eat a full meal. My stomach protested, but I managed the pad Thai when it arrived. I sat opposite Michael while he apologized again for going to the party and not challenging Dad's decision. He said he should have refused to attend in solidarity. His voice sounded hollow. He admitted he had been terrified of losing Dad completely if he took my side. He knew how cowardly that was. I didn't argue, we both knew the truth. Sophia took the couch that first night. I took Michael's bed, and he slept on the floor in a sleeping bag. He insisted, no discussion. I stood in the bedroom doorway while Sophia made up the couch and Michael unrolled his bag. We talked about the years of quiet rejection. Making honor roll in 8th grade, and Dad barely glancing at the certificate before turning on the TV with Michael. High school graduation where he took 1 photo of me and 40 of Michael even though we graduated the same year. Sophia listened quietly, face growing tighter with every story. I clenched my fists and cried while explaining I had spent years in survival mode, constantly trying to prove I deserved the basic love that should have been unconditional. Michael sat up in his sleeping bag and said he never realized how deep it went. He thought Dad was just stricter with me, not erasing me. Avoidance, sky-high expectations, and emotional absence are not the same as strict. We talked until 1 in the morning until exhaustion won. Michael's phone started ringing at 7 the next morning. I heard him silence it while starting coffee. It rang repeatedly. He looked tense when he brought me a mug in bed after switching it to silent. Texts started buzzing loud enough to hear from the next room around 8. Michael read them from the doorway, voice flat. Dad asking if I was okay. Not sure I wanted the details shared. Michael replied that I was alive and recovering but needed space. Seconds later, another text asking when he could visit. Michael looked at me. I shook my head. He typed that it was my decision, not Dad's. He set the phone face down on the counter like he couldn't stand looking at it. Sophia made scrambled eggs and toast and watched until I ate. Isabella arrived at noon with a cheap bunch of white daisies, eyes red and swollen. She set them on the coffee table and apologized for leaving the invitation visible when Michael let her in. She only realized at the party when Karen spoke up that I hadn't been invited. She talked fast, rehearsed. She was devastated, I found out through her post. She said people whispered at the party about how wrong it was, but no one walked out. She wished now someone had. I told her I didn't blame her for the photo, I was just glad she came. She cried, hugged me, and promised to visit again. The next 3 days at Michael's were mostly sleep. I slept more than I had in months. Sophia worked remotely from the couch. We talked for hours about family trauma, forgiveness versus self-protection. She spoke plainly about boundaries like she had lived it. Sophia told me she cut off her own toxic father 2 years earlier because his constant criticism made her feel worthless. Choosing her mental health over that relationship had been terrifying but worth it. She no longer lived waiting for his next judgment. She said she still missed the idea of a father sometimes, but not the reality. I wrote the difference in my phone notes. On the second day, Karen arrived with homemade chicken and rice soup in a jar. Michael grew quiet when she sat beside me and spoke honestly about David's behavior. She said David had been shattered by the betrayal, but punishing me for it was senseless. Karen regretted staying silent, thinking he just needed time. She had enabled him by pretending everything was fine. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she said watching him reject his own child was her worst nightmare. She had let us both down by hoping he would change on his own. Karen kept talking after Michael brought her tea. She had been in therapy herself for a year, working through the guilt of enabling David's emotional neglect by staying quiet. She had believed giving him space to grieve would fix him, but he turned grief into permanent rejection. Corinne declared she was finished shielding David from the consequences of his actions. She would demand he apologize and get help if he wanted any relationship with her. She looked exhausted but certain. Michael stared at her, seeing his grandmother differently. On Friday morning, Michael drove me to my regular doctor as ordered by the ER. She reviewed the hospital notes carefully, asked detailed questions about stress, sleep, eating. She was blunt but kind, diagnosing chronic stress and warning that without major changes I risked serious illness. Heart problems, stomach issues, immune breakdown. She wrote down a therapist specializing in family trauma and told me to take 2 weeks off work. I left clutching the note, scared but relieved. Michael drove me home and we talked about how David's behavior had literally been making me sick. 2 days later, he helped carry Sophia's things back and moved me into my own apartment. My fridge was covered in bright sticky notes when I opened it, each one in Sophia's handwriting. "You've got this on the orange juice, proud of you on the yogurt, 1 day at a time on the milk." She had stocked salads, sandwiches, frozen meals. Michael asked 3 times if I was sure I'd be okay alone before leaving. The silence felt heavy the moment the door closed. I found more notes in drawers, on the bathroom mirror, on my laptop. I sat at my kitchen table eating crackers and cried for no clear reason. The next 2 days, tears came without warning, while getting dressed, watching TV, brushing my teeth. I was grieving the father I never truly had while he lived 15 minutes away. This felt worse than if he had died, because then I could have blamed fate instead of his deliberate choice. Sophia checked in every evening, brought more groceries even though the fridge was full. She held me while I cried, handed me tissues, and said grief hurts this much. 2 days after returning home, I had my first appointment with Dr. Peterson. Small brick building, tiny car park. I sat in my car 10 minutes before going in, because walking through that door felt like admitting I was broken. The waiting room had uncomfortable chairs, old magazines no one read, and a white noise machine that made everything feel muffled and lonely. Dr. Peterson appeared quickly. Mid-50s, gray hair, kind eyes that didn't pity. I chose the armchair instead of the couch. It felt less like TV therapy. I told her everything. The party, the collapse, then realized I had to go back further. I spoke for 20 minutes straight about being 10 when Mom left, Dad teaching Michael to drive but not me, every Father's Day spent trying so hard and getting nothing. Dr. Peterson listened without interrupting, taking notes, looking at me like she was truly seeing me. She waited a long moment before asking what I actually wanted from my relationship with David now. The question caught me off guard because saying "love" out loud made it feel too real. My voice broke. She gently pushed me to separate what was possible from what had already been destroyed. She suggested imagining a relationship built on clear boundaries instead of endlessly trying to earn his love. The idea both freed and terrified me. Freedom because I could stop performing, stop waiting for him to finally notice me. Terror because it meant letting go of the dream after 10 years. Accepting the father-daughter bond I wanted would never exist. Dr. Peterson said sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves is mourn what we will never have so we can make room for what is actually possible. I left her office empty and strangely lighter, like I had set down something too heavy to keep carrying. Michael phoned that evening while I heated one of Sophia's frozen meals. He hesitated before saying David kept begging him for a chance to apologize in person. I stared at the microwave timer while Michael asked what he should tell him. I said I wasn't ready to see David and that his presence upset me. If Dad wrote a letter, I would read it, then decide. Michael warned me Dad wasn't good at writing or feelings. 3 days later, Michael arrived holding a plain envelope like it might explode. He handed it over gently, posture saying he had already read it. One handwritten page in David's messy scrawl. It began with admitting he was wrong. He said seeing me collapse terrified him and made him realize he had been too harsh, that he should have done better. I read it twice looking for more. The 10 years were barely mentioned. Every sentence centered on his feelings, his fear, his pain from the divorce, his inability to look at me without seeing her face. There was no actual apology for excluding me, for rejecting me, for the kitchen words. Michael watched while I placed it on the coffee table. It felt defensive, like he was explaining instead of owning anything. Michael admitted he had told Dad the letter wasn't enough. At my next session, Dr. Peterson read it carefully, underlining phrases. She pointed out how David said he had been too hard instead of admitting rejection, how he focused on his terror watching me collapse instead of the harm he caused. She asked what I needed that the letter failed to give. I wanted him to say clearly that I had not deserved any of it, that looking like Mom was never a crime, that his unresolved grief had robbed us both of a father-daughter relationship. Dr. Peterson suggested I write my own letter spelling out exactly what I required, even if I never sent it. Sometimes putting words to what we wish we could say helps us know what we are truly asking for. It took 2 days and many crumpled drafts at my kitchen table. The first version was too gentle, trying to comfort David for being a bad father. Threw it away. The second version was pure rage, pages screaming about how he looked through me like I was glass. That didn't feel right either. The third draft felt honest. I wrote about losing both parents at 10. About watching him celebrate Michael while ignoring me. About the birthday party being the final proof I would never be enough. That he should have seen me as separate from his ex-wife. That he was responsible. I needed him. His pain never justified the damage, and he chose his pain over his daughter. By the fourth draft, tears blurred the ink, but the words were true, honest without protecting him. I printed it, read it aloud 3 times, then sealed it. Michael came over and I made him read it on my couch. His eyes filled halfway through the first page. When he finished, he folded it carefully and said he never understood how bad it had been. He thought Dad being physically present at holidays meant something. Having a parent in the same room but emotionally absent can hurt worse than total absence, because it rubs your face in what you're missing. Michael wiped his eyes and apologized for benefiting from the favoritism and never speaking up. He handed the envelope back and promised to deliver it without asking questions. He said he would also tell David that favoritism had hurt both of us, even the favored child. He had been reading about family systems since my collapse and realized he had been part of the problem just by accepting the benefits. Michael left with my letter. I felt both relieved to have spoken truth and terrified of the fallout. 2 days later, Michael rang while I was at work. I stepped outside for air. He said Dad had cried reading my letter, that he finally understood how much he had damaged me, and that he couldn't undo it overnight. David apparently said he had always cared but couldn't show it, that he thought I understood his coldness was aimed at Mom, not me. Michael was firm. Tears don't erase 10 years of emotional abandonment, and crying is the bare minimum reaction to learning you destroyed your child. Thank you, Michael, for saying that and for respecting my boundaries. After we hung up, I sat in my car in the parking lot wondering if Dad's tears meant anything or if they were just another way to center his own sadness. I went to see Karen the next day. She had texted asking to meet for lunch at a diner near her hotel. My hands shook on the wheel, unsure what she would say but needing to hear it. She stood when she saw me and hugged me so long my chest loosened. We ordered coffee quickly. She and David had spoken every day since the party. He kept talking about how my presence triggered memories of the divorce. Karen said she kept redirecting him to focus on my pain instead of his. David got defensive, saying she didn't understand how Mom's betrayal felt. Karen told him she was tired of hearing the same excuse. David cried during these calls, asking why everyone was against him. Karen said no one was against him. They were finally saying out loud what they had watched him do to his daughter. She was ashamed of herself for staying quiet so long, thinking time would heal him. She said my collapse in his kitchen had shown her the cost of silence. She would hold David accountable even if it cost her their relationship. She would rather lose her son than watch him keep hurting his daughter. At my next appointment, I told Dr. Peterson the first letter had been worthless because it centered David's feelings instead of my pain. She asked what accountability would actually look like. I realized I didn't know because I had never dared imagine it. Dr. Peterson handed me a fresh notebook page and we started listing. I wanted sustained change, not just emotional outbursts when confronted. No more comments that I looked or acted like Mom. He needed to remember birthdays and holidays without reminders. He needed to apologize for specific moments, like missing my high school writing award, barely speaking at my college graduation. He needed to work on his grief in therapy instead of dumping it on me. He needed to prove change over months, not days, before I let him close again. Dr. Peterson warned that David might not be capable of meeting even half of that. Some people cannot or will not do the long, painful work required to break decade-old patterns. She said to expect him to try for a while, then falter when it got hard, or to meet some conditions but not others. The most important thing, she said, was that I enforce my boundaries even if it meant accepting no relationship at all. That weekend, Sophia helped me turn the list into a clear document at my kitchen table. She was brilliant at making my messy emotions readable. We required 5 continuous months of bereavement and family therapy before I would consider regular contact. Specific apologies for missed milestones. No more references to my appearance or behavior linking me to Mom. Since private apologies meant nothing if he still treated me coldly in public, we added that public behavior had to change too. Birthdays and holidays without prompts. The list filled 2 pages. Sophia read it back and said something that stopped me cold. I wasn't asking him to be perfect or magically different. I was asking for basic respect and a genuine effort to clean up his mess. If he couldn't give that, he didn't deserve a place in my life, and that would be his loss, not mine. Michael took the list. He read it carefully, nodding in places, then folded it into his pocket. I waited nervously at home while he delivered it that evening. He texted an hour later. Dad read it twice in silence at the kitchen table, looked overwhelmed. Finally asked if any parts were negotiable. Michael said no, those were the minimum for basic decency. David asked what he could do right now to prove commitment. Michael told him to start therapy tomorrow and stop worrying about timelines. Michael said he agreed with every line and told Dad if he couldn't meet these basics, he didn't deserve me. David got defensive about some points being too harsh. Michael shut it down. 10 years of rejection is harsh. My list is just human decency. David stopped arguing. Michael left the list on the table and said Dad needed to decide if he could live up to it because there would be no shortcuts. Michael told me he was proud of me for spelling out my needs and promised to back me no matter how awkward it got. 2 weeks after my collapse, I returned to work. My boss knew I had been hospitalized for family stress-related issues. She told me to take it slow and ask for adjustments. Colleagues who knew me well noticed the change immediately. I felt steadier, more grounded. I told a few trusted ones I had been in hospital after a fight with my father. They offered support without prying. Work became a place where family felt less heavy. Sitting at my desk doing ordinary tasks felt safe. I liked the predictability, the knowledge that people expected me to be competent and calm, not broken. My manager said after the first week that I seemed different, but in a good way. She noticed I was setting firmer boundaries with difficult clients and not letting them walk over me. I admitted confronting David had changed something. I was done accepting crumbs. Isabella texted in my second week back. David had started asking family for therapist recommendations, something he had never admitted needing before. The family was waiting to see if he actually followed through or if it was just guilt talking. Several relatives had called David directly to tell him they were ashamed of how he treated me for years. One aunt had a long conversation about how painful it was to watch. An uncle told him excluding me from the birthday party had made everyone uncomfortable. Isabella said silence had made them complicit too, and they were speaking up now even when it was hard. She apologized again for the invitation photo. I told her the problem wasn't the photo, the problem was the missing invitation. Michael reported 2 weeks after the list that David had started weekly therapy with a bereavement and family specialist. He sometimes mentioned sessions, saying it was harder than he expected. The therapist was making him face things he had buried for 10 years, how much anger at Mom he had aimed at me. David admitted he had never processed the divorce. He just shut it away and pushed us apart. Michael was cautiously hopeful but realistic. 2 weeks of therapy doesn't erase 10 years. Consistency over years mattered, not weeks. Michael kept tabs so I didn't have to speak to David directly yet. He said after years of excusing the favoritism, doing this small part felt like the least he could do. In therapy, Dr. Peterson said my healing had to come first, not David's progress. I couldn't tie my mental health to his cooperation. We worked on self-compassion and dismantling the belief that I had to earn love from a parent. She had me write letters to my 10-year-old self, the child who lost her mother and then her living father. Reading them aloud in session wrecked me every time, but it was changing something deep. I was learning David's rejection had never been about my worth. His inability to process pain had always been the problem. He let unhealed grief spill onto me instead of getting help. That was his failure, not mine. Dr. Peterson said that realization was crucial because it meant I could stop trying to fix myself into someone he could love. I had always been lovable. He had simply been too wounded to see it. I told Michael I would not spend Thanksgiving with David. The idea of sitting at a table pretending everything was fine made my stomach knot. Michael understood but was torn. He wanted to support me and keep some contact with Dad now that change seemed possible. He would visit David for an hour, then spend the rest of Thanksgiving with me, Sophia, and others. He made clear to David that time would be shared. Karen rang to say she was spending Thanksgiving with us instead of David. She had told him this was the consequence of his choices. David got angry and accused everyone of abandoning him. Karen said no, consequences are not abandonment. I felt less isolated knowing Karen, Michael, and Sophia were choosing me. Maybe he was finally feeling what he had put me through. Thanksgiving turned out to be the best I could remember. Sophia hosted a small group of friends without nearby family. Michael and Karen joined after Michael's short visit to David. We burned things and laughed at our terrible cooking. Someone suggested going round the table saying what we were grateful for, corny, but it worked this year. When it was my turn, I said I was grateful for the collapse. Everyone looked shocked, but passing out in David's kitchen had forced everything into the open. All the dysfunction became impossible to ignore. I thanked the people who sat with me in hospital and afterward, who never excused David or pressured me to forgive quickly. Sophia cried and squeezed my hand. Michael said he was grateful I existed and that I finally told him how bad it had been. Karen shared old stories about David as a little boy, how sensitive he used to be, how he cried at sad films. She said someone had taught him to stuff emotions into anger, and it had cost us our relationship. Hearing those stories let me hold him accountable while softening some of the rage. He was a damaged person, not a monster. The evening filled me in a way food never could. Being with people who saw me and chose me without obligation or guilt meant more than any forced family tradition. The day after Thanksgiving, a plain white envelope in David's handwriting waited in my mailbox. I stood holding it, unsure whether to open or bin it. Sophia was tidying from the night before. I could have thrown it away without telling her. Instead, I took it inside and opened it alone. A simple turkey card. He wrote that he was glad I was alive and in therapy, but he knew he needed to become a better father. Michael rang that evening to say David had spent most of Thanksgiving at Karen's, but left early without eating. He had looked uncomfortable the whole time, like he finally understood actions have consequences, and no one would pretend everything was fine to spare his feelings. I put the card in a drawer and didn't reply. Early December nights were cold and dark. Michael brought coffee to my flat most Saturday afternoons. He said David had asked his therapist about supervised family therapy and whether I would ever consider it. Michael told him to focus on consistent individual change first. 2 weeks of therapy didn't cancel 10 years of damage. At my next session, Dr. Peterson said family therapy could help if both people genuinely wanted repair, but warned against therapists who push victims to reconcile before they're ready just to tick a progress box. I said I wasn't ready. She said that was perfectly fine. David's progress was secondary to my own. Every Tuesday evening, Sophia and I tried new recipes and talked about everything. She updated me on work and dating. I updated her on therapy and the slow rebuilding of self. Michael visited more often. He repeated that physical presence without emotional connection could hurt worse than absence because it constantly reminded you what was missing. He went quiet and admitted he had contributed by never speaking up. Karen called every few days without mentioning David, just stories about her Florida friends, book club, her own therapy. Having family who chose my well-being unconditionally was new and precious. Michael said David was still attending therapy weekly throughout December and taking it seriously, doing homework, reading books on grief and family wounds. In mid-December, he apparently had a breakthrough realizing he had been punishing me for mom's choices and treating me like his ex-wife instead of his daughter. He cried through the entire session, something he had never done before. I wondered if it changed anything, or if he was only now facing what he should have faced a decade ago. 2 days before Christmas, David asked Michael to pass on a longer letter. I said I would read it. I opened the thick envelope on Christmas Eve, alone with a cup of tea on my couch. This letter was different. Specific memories, no excuses. He listed moments he had ignored. Missing my high school writing award night because work, yet always making time for Michael's games. Barely speaking to me at college graduation while he photographed other parents hugging their kids. He wrote that years of small dismissals had made me invisible to him. On the second page, he apologized for letting me carry his unhealed pain, for treating me as a symbol of his failed marriage instead of his child. He said if I never wanted contact again it would break him, but he would understand. That my looking like mom, sounding like her, staying loyal, none of it had been a crime. He ended by saying he would continue therapy whether I forgave him or not. He needed to become healthy for his own sake. I cried reading it the second and third times. At my next session, Dr. Peterson read it slowly and pointed out how this letter took full responsibility without making his feelings the center. It validated everything I had felt, let me grieve the lost years, and gave a cautious spark of hope. Dr. Peterson reminded me that a strong letter didn't obligate me to reconcile, but it could inform whatever I chose next. Christmas Day was quiet and calm, the first in years that felt peaceful. I cooked too much food and watched old movies with Michael, Sophia, and Karen at Michael's flat. Karen told me she had spoken to David that morning for an hour. He had begged her to help me forgive him, saying he was in agony over what he had lost. Karen refused to pass messages. She told him to keep working and respect my timeline instead of pushing. Sophia won Scrabble and gloated. I realized I could simply exist around people who wanted me there without performing for David's attention or bracing for coldness. Early January nights iced my windows. I rewrote my reply to David's Christmas letter over Saturday morning coffee, searching for the right tone. I acknowledged his work and the accountability. No in-person contact yet, but I would consider gradual reconnection if therapy continued and change stayed consistent. To be clear, respect was non-negotiable. Any comparison to Mom or guilt about his feelings would end everything. I listed sustained therapy, owning the impact of his actions, and listening without defensiveness as conditions. Michael collected the letter Sunday and delivered it that afternoon. That night he texted. Dad read it several times, looked both relieved and serious. He said he was grateful I left the door open even a crack and that he had to earn his way through it. He asked his therapist how to prove progress with actions, not just words. In February, therapy shifted to deeper grief work. Dr. Peterson had me imagine the ideal father-daughter relationship, then compare it to what David could realistically offer. I was learning to hold two truths at once. David wanted to change after a decade of harm, and I didn't have to let either truth overpower the other. My anger toward him softened, not because I was forgiving, but because I was building a life that didn't depend on his love. Healing, Dr. Peterson said, looks like stopping waiting for someone else to repair what they broke and starting to build something new for yourself. In mid-February, Michael forwarded a short, careful email from David. After checking, I was okay receiving it. It was a polite request to write occasionally through Michael if I ever felt ready. His therapist had suggested email as a low-pressure way to rebuild contact. I stared at the screen 15 minutes before asking Dr. Peterson's opinion. In session, we weighed risks and benefits. She noted that asking permission instead of assuming showed new respect for boundaries. Given reported progress, she felt limited, structured email was reasonable if I set clear rules. I agreed to try weekly emails with strict ground rules. No guilt, no references to Mom, one breach, and it ended forever. He accepted instantly. The first few emails were stiff. He wrote about therapy, asked about my work. I gave short updates and asked about his house projects. We wrote like cautious strangers being polite. Over 6 weeks, his tone loosened. He asked follow-up questions, remembered details I shared. His therapist was teaching him active listening instead of defensiveness. I noticed him practicing. The emails felt more human than any conversation we'd had in years. Michael said David reread every message multiple times and kept a printed folder for therapy discussions. I stayed vigilant for old patterns, but something cautious was growing. Late March, I received an unexpected email while at my desk. After 3 months of consistent therapy, he wrote that he knew he couldn't ask for more than I was giving, but wondered if I would meet for coffee in public with Michael present. He would continue therapy regardless. I sat on the reply for 2 days. An entire session with Dr. Peterson was spent rehearsing boundaries and exit strategies. She role-played David saying painful things while I practiced leaving or redirecting. She reminded me repeatedly that one coffee didn't commit me to anything beyond that hour. Sophia made me promise to text the moment it ended. I emailed yes with conditions. Saturday morning, I arrived at a cafe far from our usual places. Michael was already at a corner table, looking almost as nervous as I felt. David arrived 5 minutes later, looking smaller, older, terrified of rejection. His voice shook when he thanked me for coming and admitted how difficult this was for him. The first 10 minutes were weather and traffic. Michael filled awkward pauses. David listened more than he spoke, asked about my job, kept his own updates brief. After 45 minutes, I stopped counting down. When the hour ended, David asked gently if I would consider doing it again. I said maybe, the most honest thing I had said to him in years. Michael rang that night. David had cried the moment I left because it went better than he feared, and he had been convinced I would cut contact forever. His therapist was helping him manage expectations. Trust took years to rebuild, and my willingness to try was a gift he mustn't take for granted. I told Michael I was glad David understood one coffee didn't erase a decade. Michael said he was stunned by the change in David. He never thought his father capable of this level of self-awareness. In April, we exchanged more emails and had a second coffee, this time just the two of us. I suggested it after the first went well. We spoke for over an hour. He talked about learning in therapy that his own father had been emotionally distant and never taught him how to handle pain. In one session, he admitted he had punished me for Mom's betrayal because he couldn't punish her. I shared about my own therapy and reclaiming self-worth after years of trying to earn basic affection. The conversation felt like two adults trying to understand each other instead of a daughter begging for scraps. As we left, he didn't ask about next time. He was learning to let me lead. Karen rang days later praising my pacing, open to possibility without abandoning my well-being to fix him. She said David's change felt genuine, but warned setbacks were likely. He still had far to go. She admitted she hadn't believed he could grow this much at first. Seeing him try had surprised and encouraged her. Early May, David invited me to a small family dinner for Michael's birthday. Just Michael, David, Karen, and me. I thought about it for a full day and agreed, with the clear understanding I could leave if I felt unsafe. Michael drove me to David's house, the first time since the collapse. Dinner was strange but not awful. David asked about my life, listened. While talking about Michael's new job, he started telling a childhood baseball story, then stopped mid-sentence realizing he had always praised Michael's wins and ignored mine. He apologized immediately instead of defending himself. That small moment of self-correction felt like real progress. After dinner, he disappeared and returned with a handmade photo album, not a family one, just mine. He placed it in my hands and said to open it when I was ready. Inside were pictures I had never seen, childhood moments, school plays, my 10th grade piano recital in the blue dress. He had taken them but never shared. He had noticed me even while pushing me away. David explained therapy homework involved sorting old photos to separate memories of me from memories of Mom. His therapist made him look at pictures of me at different ages and talk about them to see me as a separate person. The album was both comforting and devastating. I looked through it at home and cried for the father who had loved me enough to keep these, yet couldn't show it. At my next session, I set the album between Dr. Peterson and me like it might break. She turned pages gently while I explained the therapy exercise. She stopped at the photo of 10-year-old me at the piano recital and asked how it felt to know he had kept these moments hidden. I said it was painful. He had been paying attention yet rejecting me anyway. Dr. Peterson said both feelings could exist. Gratitude that he had seen me, grief that he hadn't shared it in real time. We spent the session holding the complexity, honoring his current efforts while still mourning the lost decade. She said healing doesn't mean erasing the past or pretending everything is fine. It means knowing who David actually is and what relationship is possible now. She asked what I wanted from him going forward, not the childhood father, that was impossible. I wanted a parent who showed up, owned his mistakes, respected my boundaries, and didn't make me responsible for his emotions. By late May, we had weekly emails and monthly coffees. We would probably never be close in the storybook sense, but mutual respect was growing. David attended therapy religiously and sometimes admitted when he was struggling. I felt cautious optimism that we might build something solid, even if it could never replace what was lost. His therapist had him writing unsent letters to Mom to process anger and keep it away from me. Michael rang one night saying he had never seen Dad this committed to growth. Karen said the same. David's consistency surprised her. She warned honest change didn't mean perfect and slip-ups would come, but the shift felt authentic. First week of June, David asked to meet for coffee on a warm evening. We sat outside. He fidgeted with his cup, then said he had been thinking about what I needed next. I told him honestly that while I valued his efforts and wanted to keep connecting, some wounds were permanent. He had changed, but the little girl and teenager who needed her dad would always carry the scars. David listened without interrupting or defending. He said he had to live with the consequences of his choices, and that therapy was teaching him he could shape the present but not rewrite the past. Accepting reality, not forcing a fairy tale ending, was what let conversations like this happen. 2 months later, David and I were closer than we had been in 10 years. It was different from the childhood fantasy of him suddenly seeing me instead of Mom. I spoke to him now out of respect, not desperation for approval. I had stopped waiting for him to become the father who never existed. He still asked about my work and remembered details in therapy. I remained watchful for old patterns, but grateful for the imperfect progress. Sophia, Michael, Karen, and Dr. Peterson all praised my careful steps and reminded me healing is lifelong. Life wasn't perfect, and David doing this work 10 years earlier would have saved us all so much pain. But sometimes flawed, honest progress is the only kind available, and for now, it might be enough.